In this two-part video series, we are learning the single most important skill that you need to save any relationship. Now, I have a feeling that when I say what this skill is, a lot of people are gonna click off the video. And I think you'll understand why once I reveal it. I'd rather you use your time the way you want to than worry about how this video performs. So I'm gonna tell you what the skill is now, and I'll let you decide whether you wanna stick around for the rest of the video or not. It is the skill of apologizing. If you are still with me, that tells me that you care about improving your relationships. And really, there is nothing more central to that than getting apologies right. The problem is that as essential as it is, apologizing is hard. And even if we have the best of intentions, we might still get apologies wrong and end up doing more harm in the process. So in this two-part video series, I want to make apologizing a lot easier and more straightforward for you. We're going to be going over an exact framework for how to deliver a genuine relationship-saving apology. We're also going to be going over some very common but very costly apology mistakes to avoid at all costs. At best, these mistakes are going to compromise a relationship, and at worst, they might lead to the end of a relationship. All of this information is also going to be helpful for you if you've been on the receiving end of a half-ass apology that just left you feeling worse, but you didn't really understand why. This video is going to give you the answers to that and help us all moving forward to identify when we might be receiving a pseudo apology. My goal for this video is for you to walk away with the tools that you need to have the fulfilling, healthy relationships that you're looking for and that you deserve. And if you are new here, hi, I'm Audrey. I am a therapist, and on this channel we talk about tools for improving your work life, relationships, and overall mental health. Now, in case you're curious, yes, I am a therapist. No, my personal relationships are not perfect. As much as I would love to say that all of my apologies are impeccable and I handle all conflicts with all the patience and composure in the world, I would be lying. Growing up Asian, my idea of an apology was wordlessly being handed a plate of cut up fruit. I don't come from a culture that apologizes very freely, so I also had to learn all of this from scratch about how to actually apologize. So as much as this video is sharing the skills that I talk about with the people that I work with, it's also sharing the skills that I personally had to learn myself. These are skills that I picked up from an episode of Brene Brown's podcast, Unlocking Us. It's actually a two-part series with psychologist Harriet Lerner called How to Apologize and Why It Matters. This series is based on Harriet Lerner's book called Why Won't You Apologize? Both this book and the podcast are stunning. I would highly recommend checking both of them out, and I'll leave a link in the description to both if you're interested. So why should we apologize in the first place? Harriet Lerner says that "I'm sorry" are the two most important words in the English language. Why? Because we are human, aka we are very prone to error, which means that we are bound to hurt someone we're close to eventually, whether we mean to or not. So when this inevitably happens, it's going to be essential that we learn how to apologize and repair that hurt if we want the relationships with the people that we love and care about to remain healthy and intact. And really, it's hard to imagine what matters more than that. The annoying thing is that just like anything else in life that matters, apologizing is hard. It is so hard for many reasons. First of all, it's common to think that apologizing is a sign that we're weak, and it might make us feel small and powerless to apologize. Also, apologizing is scary because we don't know how our apology is going to be received. Is the person even going to accept our apology, or are they going to think that they have the upper hand now? Apologizing also requires us to set our pride and ego aside, and that's hard. It's hard to look at the ways that we screwed up and admit that we made a mistake, especially if we're already really hard on ourselves and we don't give ourselves a lot of room to make mistakes in the first place. It might feel too shameful to admit that we were wrong, and it might make us feel like we're a bad person or like our self-worth is at risk in some way. And so naturally, we're going to defend ourselves and we're going to justify our behavior and deflect the criticism. And if that's the case, it's going to be very unlikely that we're going to take accountability and apologize. This automatic reaction to get defensive when faced with the ways that we fell short, as understandable as it is dangerous. It is the opposite of connection and understanding, and it is going to erode our relationships over time if we don't do something about it. Luckily for us, I have the solution to beat defensiveness for us today. The solution is to have self-compassion. Every therapist's favorite. Having self-compassion means understanding that we can fall short and we can unintentionally hurt people without it meaning anything about our worth as a person. All it means is simply that, again, we are an error-prone human and we need to have this perspective of ourselves if we're going to be able to look at our mistakes head on, take responsibility for them, and apologize. Having compassion for ourselves does come from having a solid sense of self-worth. And in her book, Harriet Lerner says that to offer a serious apology, you need the inner strength to allow yourself to feel vulnerable. You need to be in touch with both your competence and your limitations. When you have fairly solid self-esteem, you can admit to being in the wrong without feeling like you're weakening the fabric of the self or losing something to the other person. Brene Brown also says in her podcast that the willingness to apologize and make amends is a function of self-worth and self-respect. The good news is that the act of apologizing in itself actually helps us to build our self-worth, because each time we offer an apology that we know is due, it restores our integrity and we gain respect for ourselves in the process. Apologizing is a chance to grow and mature, and my viewers never say no to a growth opportunity. They're gonna take on the challenge, okay? Now, in the next part of the video, we're gonna go over Harriet Lerner's 9 essential ingredients of a true apology. And to help illustrate these points, I wanna introduce you to our friends, Defensive Dan and Mature Mark. Currently, both of their partners are not happy with them because they have been spending a lot of time on their phones on date night lately. So let's see how they handle the situation differently. Starting with the first ingredient, a true apology does not include the word but. I'm sorry, but is probably the most common apology mistake. We've probably all gotten an I'm sorry, but at some point. These apologies are never satisfying, and if anything, they just make us feel worse. There is a 100% chance that whatever is going to follow that but is going to be a criticism of the other person or a justification or an excuse for the hurtful behavior in question. So in the case of our friend Defensive Dan, he might say something like, I'm sorry, but you interrupted me when I was checking my email. Or, I'm sorry, but I was getting work emails and I had to check them. Not demure. And definitely not mindful. Even if these things that Defensive Dan says after his but are true, it doesn't matter because it cancels out his initial apology, and his partner is probably going to leave feeling invalidated, unheard, and even more hurt. A true apology keeps a focus on your actions and not on the other person's response or feelings. So, what does it look like for an apology to focus on the other person's response or feelings? I've gathered a few examples for us today, and I have a feeling that some of these are going to sound familiar to you. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you took it that way. I'm sorry you misunderstood me. I'm sorry you were offended by that. I'm sorry you're so sensitive about this. Just thinking about these statements makes me irate. I would much rather not receive an apology at all. These are half-ass apologies. They take zero accountability, and instead they shift the blame onto the hurt party and make them the problem. They effectively say it's your sensitivity or your misinterpretation that's the problem, not my hurtful behavior. Another very common apology mistake that people make to evade taking responsibility and shift it onto the other person is by saying, I'm sorry if. So Defensive Dan might say things like, I'm sorry if you were upset by me being on my phone during dinner. Like, what does this mean? If I were Defensive Dan's partner, I would be so confused. Like, Are you apologizing? Now, let's compare defensive Dan's apologies with mature Mark's apology. He would say something like, I'm sorry I hurt you. You're right, I shouldn't have been on my phone during what was supposed to be our time together. I understand how that made you feel ignored and like date night wasn't important to me. It makes sense and it won't happen again. Chef's kiss. 3 things I love about this apology. First, mature Mark clearly and explicitly apologized for his behavior, aka being on his phone during date night, not for his partner's reaction to his being on his phone during date night. Second, he accepted full responsibility for his actions and the impact that they had on his partner. He didn't get defensive, he didn't make any excuses, and he didn't reverse the blame. And third, he validated his partner's experience by saying that, yes, I get it, your feelings make sense. Mature Mark understands that even if he thinks his partner is overreacting, or he doesn't think his partner's feelings make sense, or that they're not valid, it doesn't matter. What matters is that these are his partner's feelings and he cares about his partner and he cares about their relationship, so he's going to apologize anyways. Mature Mark also understands that even if he doesn't think he did anything wrong and it wasn't his intention to hurt his partner's feelings, that also doesn't matter. And explaining to his partner, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, that wasn't my intention, it wouldn't make his partner feel any better. It would just come off as an excuse. He understands that even though he didn't intend to hurt his partner's feelings, the impact was still that his partner's feelings were hurt, and impact always takes precedent over intent. General rule of thumb, a true apology always starts with, I'm sorry, This is the only way to clearly apologize for our part and take full responsibility and validate the other person's experience. I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry if, or I'm sorry you should be avoided at all costs. These are pseudo apologies and they're just gonna do more harm. A true apology doesn't get caught up in who's more to blame or who started it. Defensive Dan might take this opportunity to bring up that one time last month that his partner checked their work email on their date night, or he might bring up that thing that his partner did 5 months ago that was way worse. On the other hand, mature Mark doesn't take this opportunity to blame or criticize his partner back or play the victim. He understands that the time that his partner is sharing their side is not the time to be sharing his side. He understands to save his side for a separate conversation that's going to happen after he has helped his partner resolve their feelings first. And he also understands that this is the most effective way to get through a conflict. Mature Mark understands that relationships aren't a competition. It's not about insisting on justice and proving why you're right and they're wrong and making sure that you win and they lose. This approach is poison to relationships. Relationships are about investing in the other person's well-being and in the relationship. And sometimes that means apologizing even if we don't think it's completely fair and even if our side hasn't been heard yet. I know. A true apology includes an offer of reparation or restitution that fits the situation. Just saying I'm sorry is not going to cut it. Even if we say I'm sorry 5,000 times, we also need to offer a corrective action that would set things right. Harriet Lerner says that you can't separate action from a heartfelt apology, and that the sincerity test of an apology is in the follow-up. So we might say something like, what can I do to make this better? Or what can I do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Or that you don't feel like this again? In some cases, like with a friend mature Mark, the action is obvious. It would be to put his phone away on do not disturb or just completely off. And he can say that right away. And that way he is showing to his partner that he's serious when he says he's sorry. Will mature Mark always feel like putting his phone away on date night? Maybe not. Maybe it makes him anxious to not be connected to the outside world via his phone for a couple of hours. But he's gonna do it anyways because the relationship matters to him. So naturally it follows that the next ingredient of a true apology is that it requires us to do our best to avoid a repeat performance. If mature Mark took his phone out on a date night after he said he wouldn't, that would render his initial apology meaningless. A true apology does not overdo. Overdoing an apology would look like if someone told us that something that we did hurt their feelings and we just start crying and being like,
oh my god, I'm such a terrible person. Oh my god, I'm the worst. I don't know how you're ever gonna be able to forgive me.
not considerate, definitely not demure. We've hijacked the other person's hurt with our own, and now the other person has to be the one to take care of us, and we put even more emotional burden on them on top of the hurt that they're already feeling. We can show remorse without visibly collapsing into shame, and yes, this does involve having good emotional regulation and a strong sense of self-worth, again, knowing that we can make a mistake and it doesn't take away from our worth as a person. We can simply say something like, I feel badly that I hurt you, or it hurts me to know that I caused you this hurt. This would be a true apology, because a true apology focuses on the other person's feelings, not our own. A true apology should not serve to silence the other person. Our friend Defensive Dan might say something like, okay, I'm sorry. I already said I'm sorry. Okay, let's just move on. Before his partner has even finished talking yet. If I were Defensive Dan's partner, I'd be like, how can you be sorry when you don't even fully know what you're apologizing for? Sometimes it can feel easier to say sorry just to shut down the conversation and get the other person to stop talking because we don't want to listen to their criticism and we just want things to go back to normal. Things aren't going to go back to normal this way. The only way that Defensive Dan and his partner are going to be able to repair this hurt and move on fully is if Defensive Dan listens to his partner's hurt in full first, before apologizing, even if it sucks for him to hear. A true apology should not be offered to make you feel better if it risks making the other person feel worse. Some people might actually never want to hear from us again because they've deemed the hurt that we caused them irreparable. And at this point, if we were to just pop up in their lives and apologize, that would be intrusive and nothing good would come out of it. We might have an urge to apologize to help our own healing, maybe by having a chance to explain ourselves or to soothe our own guilt. However, this should not be the main motive behind an apology. An apology should purely be for the other person's healing, not our own. Apologizing is about doing the right thing, and if this person has communicated that they don't want to hear from us again, the right thing to do in this case is to respect that. A true apology does not ask the other person to do anything, not even to forgive. A fine way to ruin an apology is to view your apology as an automatic ticket to forgiveness and redemption. That is, it's really about you and your need for reassurance. Harriet Lerner will not hesitate to call you out. It's only natural for us to want the other person to forgive us when we apologize. However, we need to accept that this might not happen right away. And also, how could it when no time has passed yet for any corrective action to happen? Apologies need time to take hold, especially if it was a significant hurt. And if we try to rush the other person into forgiving us, that might lower the value of our apology and make them feel worse. The hurt party needs space to come to a place of forgiveness on their own, not by being coerced into it. Or we might hope to get something else out of apologizing. Maybe that the other person finally sees their contribution to the issue. If our intention behind apologizing is to get something out of it that would be purely for our own benefit, that is not a true apology. A true apology is exclusively about giving to the other person, not asking them to give us something back. Now, I hate to break it to you, but I'm going to anyways because I don't want your relationships to crumble, okay? Even if we follow these 9 ingredients to a T, it's still not going to save our relationship unless we've truly and deeply listened to the other person's criticism of us without getting defensive. I know it's not fun to sit through criticism, and it is so hard to not get defensive. The truth is, though, that if we can't get past our defensiveness and take criticism, our relationships are going to suffer. So because this is such a tough thing to do, yet it is so essential to having healthy relationships, this topic deserves its own whole video, and that's going to be coming out next Sunday. So I really hope to see you there, because the skills that we picked up today really wouldn't be complete without the skills that we're going to pick up next week. In the meantime, if you are looking for more guidance on how to navigate difficult conversations, I'd recommend checking out this video next on how to handle conflict when you hate conflict. But in any case, as always, I hope you are doing well. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Bye.